She thought he was just another tired customer. So she brought him a burger, a smile, and a slice of pie. On the house. What she didn't know? That stranger was Michael Jordan. And the very next day, she was fired. Fired for being kind. Fired for treating someone with respect. Fired because she didn't recognize a celebrity in disguise. But what happened next? Let's just say, this black waitress went from jobless to being the face of a global movement. All because she stayed true to who she was. Who was behind her comeback? What did Michael Jordan do? And how did the world rally around her overnight? She had no idea who he was. It all started with a rainy afternoon and a smile that would change everything. Keisha was used to long, thankless days. She worked 6 days a week at a small, old-fashioned diner tucked into the corner of a quiet Chicago neighborhood. It wasn't fancy. Cracked vinyl booths, faded wall menus, and a flickering neon open sign that buzzed just loud enough to be annoying. Still, it was her job, and she took pride in doing it right. As a black woman in the service industry, Keisha knew what it meant to be overlooked. She didn't expect praise or recognition. She only asked for respect, and tried to give it to every customer who walked through those smudged glass doors. That day, the rain poured in sheets, blurring the view outside. A few regulars trickled in, shaking off umbrellas and grumbling about the weather. Then, just after 2 p.m., the front door creaked open again. A tall man walked in slowly, wearing a gray hoodie pulled low over his head and a black baseball cap with a simple letter C stitched on the front. He wasn't flashy, didn't demand attention. In fact, most people barely noticed him. But Keisha did. Not because he looked important, but because he looked tired. The kind of tired you can't hide behind designer shoes or celebrity smiles. He took a seat in the farthest booth, back against the wall, eyes on the menu like he was trying to disappear. Most servers might have ignored him. He wasn't giving off big tipper vibes, and he didn't come in with swagger or a crowd. But Keisha, ever the professional, walked over with a warm smile. "Afternoon, sir," she said. "Rough weather out there. What can I get started for you?" The man looked up. His eyes were kind but guarded. "Just a burger and fries. Maybe some peace and quiet, too." Keisha laughed softly. "Well, you've come to the right place for both." She took his order and walked away, not realizing she had just spoken to Michael Jordan. Yes, the Michael Jordan. The legend of the NBA. The man behind 6 championship rings, countless commercials, and a legacy known worldwide. But to Keisha, he was just another guest. And that was exactly what made her different. She didn't fuss over him, didn't ask for a selfie, didn't even hint at recognition. She just brought him his food, kept his drink full, and treated him like he mattered. Because that's who Keisha was. She didn't know she was serving greatness. She only knew she was serving a man who looked like he could use a little kindness. And that was enough. What she didn't know was that this simple act of decency was about to change everything. The moment that changed everything. Sometimes, one small act of kindness is all it takes to shift the course of your life. Keisha had no idea the tall man quietly eating in the back booth was a global icon. To her, he was just a tired customer trying to find a moment of peace in a world that rarely offers it. When she returned with his food, a classic cheeseburger, golden fries, and a tall glass of iced tea, she noticed he hadn't moved much. He sat with his head low, barely looking up. Most waitresses might have assumed he didn't want to be bothered, but Keisha? She brought him a slice of warm apple pie anyway. "On the house," she said with a smile. "It's not on the menu, but I always sneak one out when someone looks like they need it." He chuckled, just a little, finally meeting her eyes. "You always this nice?" "I try to be," she replied. "You never know what someone's going through." It was a simple exchange, but it landed like a thunderclap. To Michael Jordan, a man who'd grown used to people treating him like a brand instead of a human, it meant something. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to go viral. She was just being kind. But not everyone saw it that way. Across the diner, a few rowdy regulars watched with sour expressions. 3 men in suits, loud, entitled, and known for tipping poorly, had just walked in minutes after Jordan. One of them, clearly irritated, waved Keisha over. "We've been here for 10 minutes, one snapped. "Why are you wasting time with that guy?" "He came in before you," she explained calmly. "And everyone deserves to be served with respect." Another man scoffed. "Do you even know who we are? We come here every week." "I know," she replied, "and I treat all my guests the same." Her response wasn't rude, it wasn't defiant, it was professional, grounded, and fair. But that didn't stop the tension from rising. The entitled customers rolled their eyes and muttered insults under their breath. Still, Keisha refused to back down. What she didn't know was that her manager had overheard the entire exchange from the kitchen. And he wasn't happy. To him, the regulars were more important than a stranger in a hoodie. In his eyes, Keisha wasn't managing relationships. She was putting customer loyalty at risk. It didn't matter that she had been kind, honest, and respectful. What mattered was that she had stood her ground and stood up to the wrong people. Michael Jordan quietly finished his meal and slipped out the door. But before leaving, he handed her the billfold, with a $500 tip inside and a small handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you for being real. You made a difference today." Keisha smiled, touched by the gesture. She had no idea it would be the last shift she'd ever work at that diner. The storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Fired for kindness. She showed grace. They showed her the door. Keisha barely had time to process the sweet note and generous tip before she was called into the back office. The tone was cold. The kind of cold that made the air feel heavier than it should. Her manager, Mr. Lyle, a short, stocky man with a permanent scowl etched into his face, stood there, waiting with crossed arms and a clipboard. The door clicked shut behind her. "Keisha," he started, voice clipped, "we need to talk about your behavior today." She blinked, confused. "My behavior?" "Yes," he said flatly. "You prioritized a nobody in a hoodie over our most loyal customers." "He came in first," she replied calmly, "and I treated him with respect, like I do everyone." Mr. Lyle tossed the clipboard onto the desk. "This isn't about respect. This is about understanding who matters. You embarrassed the regulars. You were confrontational. You showed poor judgment." Keisha was stunned. "So I'm being punished for being kind?" "You're being let go," he said, stone-faced. "Effective immediately." No warning, no written notice, no final paycheck. Just like that, she was out. She walked out the back entrance of the diner, the rain still falling, soaking her apron as she stood there for a moment in disbelief. She had shown up on time every day, covered extra shifts when others called out, and never once lost her temper, even when customers were rude, even when tips were low. And now, for treating someone like a human being, she was out of a job. The absurdity of it hit her like a wave. Her kindness, the very thing that made her stand out, had been labeled a liability. She trudged home, soaked to the bone, holding on to that little note from the man in the booth like it was a lifeline. Thank you for being real. You made a difference today. Who was he? Why did those words feel so heavy now? By the time Keisha reached her apartment, her emotions had caught up to her. She cried, not just because of the job, but because of the message behind it all. That being decent wasn't enough. That if you weren't playing politics, you were disposable. She lay awake that night, replaying the conversation in her head, wondering if she could have said something different, done something better. But deep down, she knew the truth. She did the right thing, and still got punished. What she didn't know, not yet, was that the man she'd just been fired over was Michael Jordan, and that decision to treat him with dignity? It was about to flip her entire world upside down. The stranger revealed. The man she treated with kindness wasn't just anybody. He was a legend, and now the world knew her name. The next morning, Keisha was curled up on her small couch, still in her pajamas, scrolling half-heartedly through job listings on her cracked phone screen. Her inbox was empty. Her fridge was nearly bare. Her heart, honestly, was heavy. Then her phone buzzed. Once, twice. Then it wouldn't stop. Text after text from friends she hadn't heard from in years. Missed calls. Instagram DMs. A voicemail from her cousin shouting, "Girl, turn on the news right now." Confused, Keisha flipped on the dusty old TV in the corner. The screen flickered to life just in time to catch a headline plastered across the bottom of the screen. Michael Jordan's secret diner visit goes viral. Waitress fired for kindness? Her jaw dropped. The footage was everywhere. Sports blogs, Twitter, TikTok. Photos snapped from security footage and by quiet observers. Even a blurry image of the check she'd been handed, showing a $500 tip and a note that read, "Thank you for being real. You made a difference today." MJ. Michael Jordan. The Michael Jordan. Keisha's heart stopped for a second. That quiet man in the hoodie, the one she thought was just another tired customer looking for peace. He was the greatest basketball player of all time. A billionaire, a cultural icon, a man who could walk into any room and command the world's attention, but chose to walk into a small diner alone, hoping for nothing more than a moment of normalcy. And she had given it to him, without even knowing. Within hours, the story exploded. Hashtags like "So fired for kindness" and "Keisha deserves better" started trending. People were tagging ESPN, TMZ, and even Oprah. But what truly broke the internet? A new post on Michael Jordan's official Instagram. A black-and-white photo of Keisha smiling as she set down his plate, caught by a fellow diner. In the caption, Jordan wrote, "In a world full of noise, Keisha reminded me what quiet dignity looks like. She treated me like everyone else. She treated me like a person. And for that, she lost her job. We're going to fix that." The comment section exploded with praise. Celebrities reposted it. Activists called for justice. Thousands of people shared their own stories of kindness, and how often it's overlooked or punished. Keisha's phone rang again, this time from a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered nervously. "Keisha?" a smooth, unmistakable voice said on the other end. "This is Michael Jordan. We need to talk." Her world froze. The man she thought would never remember her name had just called her personally, and he wasn't done helping. The comeback was bigger than the fall. Sometimes life knocks you down, just to set you up for something greater. Keisha could hardly believe the voice on the other end of the phone. It was Michael Jordan, not his manager, not his assistant. Him, calm, kind, and sincere. "I don't like how you were treated," he told her. "You didn't just serve food that day. You showed something rare, grace under pressure." That matters more than people think." Keisha was speechless. Her hands trembled as she gripped the phone. "I want to help," Jordan said. "You didn't lose a job. You started a movement." In the days that followed, everything changed. Michael Jordan publicly offered to cover Keisha's living expenses while she figured out her next move. But it didn't stop there. He introduced her to a network of people: restaurant owners, nonprofit leaders, and even media figures who wanted to tell her story. Suddenly, job offers came pouring in. One upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago invited her to manage their front-of-house team. A local news outlet wanted to interview her live on air. A national talk show sent a car to pick her up. But Keisha didn't just want to be a feel-good headline. She wanted her story to mean something. So, she launched her own initiative. Kindness First, a nonprofit focused on recognizing and supporting service workers who go above and beyond, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. With Jordan's help, she created a small grant fund for waiters, waitresses, cooks, and cleaners who had been treated unfairly or overlooked. She called it the Dignity Fund, because she knew firsthand that sometimes all someone needs is a little dignity to keep going. Her story became a symbol, not of loss, but of what happens when character meets opportunity. The very diner that fired her tried to reach out, to apologize, to clear the air once the backlash hit. But Keisha had already moved on. She didn't return bitterness with bitterness. She just smiled and kept building something better. The last scene in her story, at least for now, took place a few months later, when Michael Jordan returned to Chicago for a charity gala. On stage, he surprised the crowd by calling Keisha up next to him. "She reminded me that greatness isn't just found in arenas or on championship banners," he said. "Sometimes it's found in the quiet courage of a black waitress who chooses kindness, even when no one's watching." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Keisha, once quietly working in a forgotten diner, now stood before a crowd of thousands. Not for what she had, but for who she was. Because in the end, she didn't just serve a legend. She became one in her own right.